Hi, I just had a chat with a colleague about the online education experience. Having had a chat with my discipline group in a meeting today, we're all taking away different experiences, many of them centered around technology. Um, but let's step back for a minute and think about how the technology fits into education as a whole, what we can take away from it. So just a few comments about what we've experienced and what I think are the takeaways just a few weeks in. This is all obviously going to change as we move on. So what are we finding with online? Now, let me give you a bit of context here. I'm generally using Zoom for delivering classes, but a lot of my classes, particularly my lectures, are pre-recorded using Camtasia. So it means that as I do a lecture, I stop, I introduce new material that I hadn't thought of. I'm not a scripting guy, so it allows me to be a lot more flexible about things that I introduce into a lecture. Having said that, an hour and a half lecture takes a lot longer than an hour and a half to prepare. I can't imagine how long it takes for those people that actually write scripts and do all that. So I'm using Zoom to deliver my classes. Now, interestingly, what I've been doing over the last few weeks is I have pre-recorded lectures in Camtasia, and during the lecture time, I run a Zoom class where I top and tail the lecture. So I start by telling them, giving them a bit of context, then I simply play my pre-recorded lecture, and at the end I tail it up a bit. I'm sitting there while this is happening. I've got my microphone on, but what I actually find is students are discussing things in the chat box, and I'm getting some other feedback, and I'm giving them some feedback as the main lecture rolls through. So I'm sort of being two people in one when I'm doing that. The engagement in chat rooms I find particularly positive, not just in lectures, but also in tutorials. For some reason, the pseudo-anonymity that a chat box gives you encourages students to engage a lot more than they would in class. And that's a real positive. The second thing, as I've already indicated, even though during the Zoom lecture time I'm just running a pre-recorded lecture, I am still getting pretty good attendance there. I'm getting over half of my cohort turning up to that. Now, bear in mind, not everybody learns the same way. But having talked to my colleague Dave about this today, in fact, just a few minutes ago, I think there is something, we assume, and these are Dave's words, we assume that students are focused around our subject and they're just as into it as we are. They're not. They have other commitments, they have other subjects, they have assignments, they have work. And so for many of them, the structure of having a particular lecture time is actually a positive. It's a motivating positive. We used to think that we as lecturers play a role in that not only do we deliver material, but we motivate. And part of the way that we entertain, hopefully in lectures, is a motivation. It gives nuance and texture to the material that helps students understand what's going on and engage with the material. But at an even more basic level, it's not just we as entertainers and teachers who are a plus, but the structure to their week that a lecture time gives seems to be a positive. And I wouldn't have thought of this. We often say that, in fact, over the last few years, as the pseudo-pedagogues have said to us, we need to go away and let students study in their own time. A lot of them, if you let them study in their own time, they won't. They have other calls on their time. They do not have the motivation. I'm not saying this applies to everybody. Some people are highly motivated. Some people, it's like me watching a horror movie, right? If I'm watching it by myself, I will pause it, I'll go away, and I might not come back to it. But if I'm watching with someone else, I'm forced to go through that bit. I might zone out for a bit, but I zone back in. So pre-recorded lectures do get engagement, but most significantly, and this was the surprise, that even though they're pre-recorded, even though I'm playing a pre-recorded lecture, students do attend the lecture times. Now, we do know that learning is a social experience. I mean, we talk about the dynamic of us being in a classroom and engaging with students and using body language. It is a learning experience, and the feedback we're getting from students is, surprisingly, they wish they could come back to class. So we've always known this, but the pseudo-pedagogues have tried to say, oh, online learning, forgetting that, well, hang on, if they're all going to be happy with online learning, what comparative advantage does my institution have compared to, say, the Harvards or the Cambridges? Everybody can do a Harvard or Cambridge online course. It's the one-on-one interaction, it's the personal interaction that matters. And I'll come back to one-on-one in a little minute. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much. So what takeaways? Where do we go to after the plague enables, the plague finishes or it reduces and we can go back to normal teaching? Well, look, many of us have already delivered, we have recorded lectures, but they were more a supplement to our in-class performance. But when you step back and think about it, if I've got a subject where I've got 6 different cohorts, each attending a lecture, online lectures are scalable. Why should I have 40 people in the lecture when I can have 240 in the same lecture? It doesn't really matter. So we probably don't need to repeat lectures. We are, however, releasing academic labour to work different ways. And I talked to some colleagues at different institutions, although it's happening at mine as well. And one of the really interesting things that some tutors have come up with is the idea of multiple people teaching a class. Now, I remember when I did this many years ago at a different institution at a lecture, and probably one of the most engaging lectures I did was where 2 of us shared a lecture and we fed off each other. And the students really loved that. Well, what we're able to do now, given that we're delivering it online, is there may be one person talking through the material and fielding broad questions that people have no problems asking. But there are other people, there'll be 2 people in a class, for example. One is, the face that you see. One is the other one that's dealing with chat questions. They come up in the little chat box. So there's multiple modes of interaction there. The other thing that releasing all this academic labour does is enables us to get back to what teaching really is, which is it's tailored. Many people don't need tailored teaching, but remember, we're not delivering for a homogenous cohort. Some people are happy to go to a lecture. Some people need to bounce their ideas off you. They need that one-on-one interaction. And maybe where we go back after this is we scale down the amount of lecture, we get rid of repeat lectures, and we release that academic labour for small group interaction so that the teaching can be really personal. Because after all, what is a university's comparative advantage? Other than its brand name, a university's comparative advantage is that face-to-face personal contact. Otherwise, you may as well go off and get a degree from Khan Academy. Thoughts? Let me know. We'll see what we come up with after a few more days or weeks of doing this type of teaching.